When Trish Regan was let go by Fox Business, because of her controversial take on the coronavirus pandemic in 2020, many people felt she was ultimately responsible for how things ended. To them, she had crossed a professional line, leaving her employers with little choice but to respond forcefully. Fast forward 5 years, and Regan remains active in the media industry, having successfully kept her voice relevant as an independent podcaster. Yet beyond her well-known public persona, there is a side of Trish Regan that many people are not fully aware of. Born Patricia Ann Regan, she spent part of her youth participating in beauty pageants, an experience that helped shape her confidence and public presence. Growing up in New Hampshire, she worked summer jobs bussing tables around New England, developing a strong work ethic early on. She took immense pride in her roots and felt honored to win Miss New Hampshire, which allowed her to represent her home state at the Miss America 1994 pageant. In later interviews, Regan emphasized that pageantry was far more demanding than many assume, explaining that it required quick thinking, relatability, discipline, and poise under pressure. She once remarked that walking confidently in high heels and a swimsuit was a skill in itself when she did not particularly miss, although she did not win Miss USA 1994. Regan surprised many by earning a special award for her operatic performance, revealing a musical talent few fans knew about. Singing was once a serious career ambition for her, and she pursued formal vocal training in Graz, Austria, as well as at the New England Conservatory of Music in Boston. Despite her passion and ability, her path ultimately shifted away from music. Journalism had always been another calling. As early as 5th grade, she gravitated toward reporting and writing, even serving as a school correspondent for a local New Hampshire newspaper. After completing her studies at the New England Conservatory, Regan enrolled at Columbia University to study history. In a surprising turn, she then pursued a career in finance, working as an analyst in emerging debt markets at Goldman Sachs, fluent in Spanish. She focused on Latin American sovereign debt, particularly in Argentina, Brazil, Mexico, and Venezuela. Her financial expertise eventually opened the door to journalism again when Bloomberg Television offered her a role as a correspondent, allowing her to merge finance with reporting. Beginning at Bloomberg in 2000, Regan covered the fallout of the dot-com bubble from Silicon Valley and San Francisco. She later moved to New York, working as a correspondent for CBS News and CBS Market Watch, contributing to programs such as the CBS Evening News, Face the Nation, and 48 Hours. In 2002, her work earned her the Outstanding Young Broadcast Journalist award from the Northern California Society of Professional Journalists. 4 years later, Regan returned to financial television as an anchor at CNBC, hosting the network's top-rated daily markets program. The Call, her investigative reporting on terror connections in South America, earned her an Emmy nomination in 2007, while her documentary work on post-Hurricane Katrina infrastructure failures brought her a Gerald Loeb nomination. During this period, she also reported for NBC's Nightly News and The Today Show and covered the 2008 financial crisis in real time. She went on to produce and host CNBC's 2 highest-rated documentaries, Marijuana Inc. and Marijuana USA, later publishing her book Joint Ventures, Inside America's Almost Legal Marijuana Industry in 2010, where she accurately predicted the industry's mainstream future by the mid-2010s. Regan maintained strong ties with earlier employers, including Bloomberg, where she hosted Street Smart with Trish Regan. Her career reached a new level in 2015, when she joined Fox News and Fox Business, anchoring Intelligence Report with Trish Regan. With greater visibility came greater controversy. Reports later suggested that Fox News CEO Roger L. had considered her as a potential replacement for Megyn Kelly after Kelly's departure. However, L. resigned amid sexual misconduct allegations before any such move could happen, and the network ultimately placed Tucker Carlson tonight in Kelly's former time slot. Regan later transitioned into a more opinion-driven format, with Trish Regan Primetime gaining greater editorial control. One of her most notorious controversies followed a Fox Business segment titled Something Rotten in Denmark, in which she sharply criticized Denmark's social welfare system, comparing it to Venezuela's economic collapse. Danish officials and media strongly rejected her claims, prompting a public response video from Denmark's Social Democrats and criticism from Finance Minister Christian Jensen, who cited data from the OECD to refute her assertions. The backlash questioned her journalistic rigor, even among some of her supporters. The most damaging controversy came in March 2020, when Regan described COVID-19 coverage as an impeachment scam against President Trump. her comments drew widespread outrage from health professionals, lawmakers, and the public. As criticism mounted and the pandemic worsened, Fox Business placed her show on hiatus before ultimately cutting ties with her. In a formal statement, the network thanked her for her contributions, while Regan responded by expressing gratitude and announcing her intention to focus on family. Her departure from Fox marked the beginning of a new chapter. In 2021, Regan launched The Trish Regan Show, produced by her own multimedia company. The podcast quickly gained traction, amassing over 1 million subscribers on YouTube and tens of millions of monthly views, becoming one of the platform's top-ranked podcasts. She also became executive editor at American Consequences and co-founded 76research.com, an independent financial research firm. Married to her husband James since 2001, Regan is a mother of 3 and has openly discussed the challenges of balancing career and family life. Now in her early 50s, she remains a prominent conservative commentator, keynote speaker, and media entrepreneur. To supporters, her story represents resilience and determination. Even critics often acknowledge her ability to recover, adapt, and continue moving forward qualities she once learned early on when pageantry taught her how to think on her feet. In the years following her reinvention as an independent media voice, Trish Regan leaned fully into the freedoms and risks that came with operating outside traditional television networks. Without corporate producers or editorial gatekeepers shaping her content, she had complete control over tone, subject matter, and messaging. This autonomy allowed her to sharpen her identity as a conservative economic commentator, often blending financial analysis with political critique in a way that mirrored but also diverged from her earlier cable news persona. While her critics argued that her approach had grown more combative, supporters viewed the shift as authenticity finally unfiltered by network constraints. Regan's podcast format gave her the ability to speak directly to an audience that already felt alienated from mainstream media institutions. She frequently addressed that sentiment head-on, framing her own departure from Fox as evidence of what she described as a broader intolerance for dissenting viewpoints within legacy media. Whether discussing inflation, government spending, foreign policy, or free speech, she positioned herself as someone willing to say what others would not. This framing resonated strongly with a segment of viewers who felt underserved or misrepresented by traditional news outlets, helping her rapidly grow a loyal following. At the same time, Regan demonstrated a clear understanding of modern media economics. She diversified her revenue streams through advertising partnerships, subscriber-based content, sponsorships, and cross-promotion with financial research platforms. Her ownership stake in the production of her show meant that she was no longer dependent on a single employer for income or exposure. This business-minded approach reflected her background in finance and reinforced the idea that her career trajectory, while unconventional, was far from accidental. Despite the success of her digital platforms, Regan remained a polarizing figure. Media watchdogs and critics continued to scrutinize her commentary, often accusing her of blurring the line between opinion and fact. Supporters countered that opinion journalism had always been part of American media culture and that Regan was simply more transparent about her ideological stance than many mainstream commentators. This ongoing tension kept her firmly in public discourse, ensuring that even negative attention sustained her relevance. Beyond politics and economics, Regan occasionally used her platform to reflect on personal resilience, career setbacks, and the realities of public scrutiny. She spoke openly about the emotional toll of being dismissed from a major network and the fear that accompanies sudden professional uncertainty. Rather than portraying herself as a victim, she framed the experience as a test of resolve, emphasizing that adaptability and persistence were essential traits in an unpredictable world. These reflections helped humanize her to listeners, who saw parallels between her struggles and their own professional or personal challenges. Her role as a keynote speaker further expanded her influence beyond digital audiences. At financial conferences, investment summits, and policy forums, Regan drew on her experience across Wall Street, network television, and independent media to discuss fiscal policy, market volatility, and geopolitical risk. These appearances reinforced her credibility with audiences who valued her first-hand exposure to both financial institutions and newsrooms. Even those who disagreed with her politics often acknowledged her depth of experience in covering economic cycles and global markets. Regan's marriage and family life remained a consistent anchor throughout her career transitions. She frequently credited her husband's support as crucial during periods of upheaval, particularly after leaving Fox. Balancing motherhood with the demands of media entrepreneurship required flexibility, and she admitted that the boundaries between work and home were often blurred. Still, she described this integration as preferable to the rigid schedules of cable news, allowing her greater presence in her children's lives while maintaining professional momentum. As the media landscape continued to evolve, Regan's story became part of a broader narrative about the decline of traditional television dominance and the rise of independent voices. Her trajectory illustrated how journalists and commentators could bypass institutional barriers by cultivating direct relationships with audiences. In that sense, her career mirrored larger shifts in how information is consumed, trusted, and monetized in the digital age, yet her legacy remains contested. To admirers, she is an example of grit, self-reinvention, an ideological courage, a woman who refused to be silenced by professional exile. To critics, she embodies the dangers of partisan media ecosystems that reward provocation over nuance. Both perspectives coexist, and neither fully defines her impact. What is undeniable is that Regan has remained a fixture in political and economic conversations long after many assumed her career would fade. Looking back at her journey, from pageant stages and music conservatories to Wall Street trading floors, network studios, and finally a self-built digital empire, there is a clear through line of ambition and adaptability. Each phase of her life added a layer of skill, whether it was learning poise under pressure, mastering complex financial instruments, or navigating the relentless scrutiny of national television. Even her most controversial moments became inflection points rather than endpoints. In 2025, as media trust continues to fragment and audiences increasingly choose voices that reflect their own values, Regan occupies a defined, if divisive, space. She no longer seeks universal approval, nor does she appear interested in returning to the constraints of corporate news. Instead, she continues to refine a platform that rewards consistency, conviction, and direct engagement with viewers. Critics may question her judgment, her tone, or her interpretations, but few dispute her endurance. In an industry notorious for discarding its personalities at the first sign of controversy, Regan has managed not only to survive, but to rebuild on her own terms. That persistence rooted in lessons learned long before television cameras followed. Her every move remains one of the most defining aspects of her story. Ultimately, Trish Regan's career reflects the complexities of modern media, fame, how credibility, controversy, opportunity, and ideology intertwine. She is neither simply a cautionary tale nor an uncomplicated success story. She is a figure shaped by ambition, challenged by missteps, and sustained by an ability to pivot when circumstances demand it. And in a media era defined by rapid change and constant disruption, that ability to think on her feet, once honed on pageant stages decades ago, continues to define her path forward. As Regan moved deeper into the second half of the 2020s, she became increasingly aware that influence in the modern media ecosystem was no longer measured solely by institutional prestige, but by consistency and reach. Algorithms, audience loyalty, and message clarity mattered more than studio lighting or cable carriage. She adapted accordingly, refining her delivery to suit digital consumption patterns, tightening segments, leaning into direct address, and encouraging real-time interaction with viewers. This shift further separated her from her earlier cable news image and aligned her more closely with a generation of commentators who built influence from the ground up rather than inheriting it from a network. Her presence across platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Amazon Music allowed her to reach audiences beyond YouTube, reinforcing her position as a multi-platform media operator rather than a single-format host. Regan often emphasized that this diversification was intentional, explaining that reliance on one platform was no different from relying on one employer. Having experienced the consequences of institutional dependence firsthand, she structured her media presence to withstand sudden shifts in policy, public opinion, or technology. Over time, her commentary evolved in tone, if not ideology, while she remained firmly conservative in her economic and political outlook. She increasingly framed discussions around long-term structural issues rather than daily partisan battles. Inflation, national debt, energy independence, and geopolitical instability became recurring themes. Her background in emerging markets analysis informed her warnings about fiscal mismanagement, and she often drew parallels between historical financial collapses and contemporary policy debates. Supporters praised this approach as substantive and informed, while detractors accused her of selectively interpreting data to fit preconceived conclusions, Regan's critics never fully disengaged. Fact-checkers, media analysts, and political opponents continued to revisit her past controversies, particularly her COVID-19 commentary, as a way of contextualizing her current influence. Regan, for her part, did not shy away from these criticisms. Instead, she reframed them as proof that dissenting voices were still punished in public discourse. This rhetorical strategy reinforced her brand as an outsider who had paid a price for speaking her mind, a narrative that resonated strongly with audiences skeptical of mainstream media narratives. Despite the polarization, Regan occasionally demonstrated moments of introspection. In longer-form discussions, she acknowledged that television incentivized immediacy over reflection and that some of her earlier segments might have benefited from more nuance. These admissions were rare but notable, offering glimpses of a more reflective figure behind the confident on-air persona. To supporters, this showed growth. To critics, it was insufficient. Still, it added complexity to a public image often portrayed in extremes. Her role in financial publishing also expanded. As executive editor at American Consequences, she oversaw content that blended market analysis with geopolitical risk assessment, appealing to investors looking for macro-level insight. Through 76research.com, she positioned herself not just as a commentator but as a provider of actionable intelligence. This dual-role media personality and financial strategist reinforced her credibility among business-oriented audiences and differentiated her from commentators whose influence rested solely on opinion. Regan's speaking engagements reflected this hybrid identity. At conferences, she often spoke less about partisan politics and more about monetary policy, debt cycles, and the consequences of government intervention in markets. These appearances allowed her to engage with audiences who may not have followed her media controversies but respected her analytical background. They also underscored a central theme of her post-Fox career: that professional relevance could be rebuilt by leaning into expertise rather than visibility alone. In her personal reflections, Regan frequently returned to the idea of agency. Losing her role at Fox, she argued, forced her to confront how much of her identity had been tied to external validation. Building something independently required confronting fear, uncertainty, and the possibility of failure without institutional protection. This perspective resonated with listeners navigating career changes, layoffs, or entrepreneurial risks of their own. In this way, her story became less about politics and more about resilience in a volatile professional landscape. Her family remained largely shielded from public attention, a deliberate choice shaped by years in the spotlight. Regan spoke candidly about the pressure public careers place on private life and the importance of setting boundaries. She described motherhood as both grounding and challenging, noting that it offered perspective during moments when public criticism felt overwhelming. This emphasis on balance contrasted with the intensity of her professional persona and added another layer to her public narrative as media scholars and commentators examined the broader implications of figures like Regan. Her career increasingly served as a case study in the decentralization of media power. Once dependent on network executives and advertisers, she now operated in a space where audience trust was the primary currency. This shift carried both opportunity and risk. While it allowed for independence, it also meant accountability rested directly with the creator. There were no editors to absorb blame, no corporate statements to deflect criticism. Every misstep, insight, or provocation belonged solely to her. By 2025, Regan no longer appeared concerned with reclaiming mainstream acceptance. Instead, she focused on sustaining and growing the audience that aligned with her worldview. Continued productivity, daily shows, written commentary, speaking engagements suggested a work ethic consistent with the drive she had displayed since her youth. From waiting tables in New England to navigating Wall Street and national television, persistence remained a defining trait. In the end, Trish Regan's ongoing story is not one of simple redemption or downfall. It is a portrait of a media figure shaped by ambition, controversy, reinvention, and an unyielding belief in her own perspective. Whether viewed as a cautionary example or a testament to adaptability, her career illustrates how modern influence is forged not just by access to platforms, but by the willingness to rebuild when those platforms are taken away. And as long as audiences continue to seek voices that affirm their values and challenge their assumptions, Regan's presence in the media conversation shows little sign of disappearing. Ultimately, Trish Regan's journey underscores a defining reality of the modern media era. Relevance is no longer granted, it is earned, and continually defended. Your career has unfolded through triumphs and setbacks, acclaim and backlash. Institutional success and independent reinvention. Each chapter, whether celebrated or criticized, has contributed to a public figure who refuses to retreat quietly when challenged. She remains a symbol of how conviction, adaptability, and persistence can sustain a career even after public controversy. For supporters, she represents strength and self-determination. For critics, she is a reminder of the power and risk of partisan commentary. Yet beyond these labels, her story is fundamentally about survival in an unforgiving industry, from pageant stages to newsrooms. From network studios to a self-built digital platform, Regan has continued to move forward, shaped but not defined by her missteps. In a media landscape where voices rise and fall with remarkable speed, her endurance stands out. Whether praised or opposed, she has ensured one thing above all else: she's still being heard. And perhaps that is the most telling part of Trish Regan's story. In an environment where controversy often ends careers, she managed to turn professional exile into a reinvention. She adapted not by softening her voice, but by reshaping the way it reached people. That decision alone altered the trajectory of her life and secured her place in the evolving media ecosystem. Regan's path also reflects a broader shift in power from institutions to individuals. Where once a network determined credibility, now audiences do. She built a direct relationship with viewers who chose to listen, agree, disagree, or engage without intermediaries deciding her fate. That model, for better or worse, defines the future of commentary. Whether history judges her kindly or critically remains to be seen. What is clear is that Trish Regan did not vanish when the spotlight dimmed. She rebuilt it herself. In doing so, she demonstrated that resilience, when paired with conviction, can outlast even the loudest backlash.